I've been told by everybody up on this roof that they're all off the roof. I am on the roof of Exposure 4. Got fire through the roof of the fire building in the entire rear section.
Now remember, given the payday, has he been accounted for? Kate.
610B. That was the Mayday. 610B.
I'm here. We got a fire. 1.5-story, single-family dwelling. Fire shown from the second floor. Give me a second alarm on this.
Coming up to the top floor. I got people hanging out the top floor windows with a baby.
Commercial building. A lot of fire, a lot of smoke. Go ahead and strike a third alarm on my orders on this.
Got people on the front fire escape here with windows vented below them. We need somebody up there.
Yeah, let them know we got a job. I'm pulling up now. Second alarm, I got a 1-story single-family frame. Heavy fire showing from the attic.
So we're using all hands. We got one line stretch, fire on the 4th floor. Second line being stretched. Primary searches are underway.
Welcome to our Fire Engineering Podcast, The Command Post. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my best friend, Chief John Sulka, and we've got another great one for you tonight. As always, we always mention at the beginning of our show, we have some great classes coming up as well. You can grab them on either one of our websites or off the website calendar. Reminder, if you're looking to host a Company Officer Academy or our Chief Officer Field Training Academy, if you're a BC shift commander, that type, either with us or through CSU, same thing. Reach out to us and we can get you all lined out. So, hey, John, before we get started, so how was it? What was it like riding out with Brian, your son?
It was very cool, very cool. For those of you listening in, I was down in South Carolina in the Charleston area visiting my son and daughter-in-law. I haven't said that too many times. They got a baby coming in, so we were down for the baby shower. And while I was there, we stayed for several days. I went and rode out. I went and hung out and rode out with my son Brian at Engine 7, Rescue 7 in the North Charleston Fire Department. Busy day, running around, about 200 degrees outside. Medical calls, car crashes, and a couple of fire alarm calls. No work that day. Actually, he had a little job a little later after I left, but it was fun, and I've said this 1,000 times, and I know you've said it, and those of you listening have probably said it. Same circus, different clowns. I was there about 15 minutes, and I felt like I worked in that firehouse for 20 years. You get to know the characters right away. There's the guy that knows it all, and there's the jokester, and there's the guy that's just listening and watching TV and not paying attention, and it's just pretty funny. But I was real happy to be there and be riding out with him and watching him take runs in and listen and put the radio on and pay attention. And man, he's right on the ball. He's right on the ball. He knows what he's doing, and I was very happy to observe it myself.
Well, and you've got 5 incredible kids, and all adults now. But Brian, how excited! I saw that picture. I was talking earlier today. I went to see my buddy Ken, the new fire chief here in Wichita Falls, Texas, who's doing great things. Great department here with some great people. I told him I don't know who I'm more excited for you or for the guys and gals here at the Wichita Falls Fire Department. But John, it was funny because somebody posted, "Oh, you're out there buffing," and I went, "How cool is that? You're riding out with your kid."
You know who that was? That was Freddie LaFamina wrote buffing.
Well, and Brian, like I said, we've talked about James before. We talked about Johnny. We talked about Maureen and Colleen, and but Brian, I mean, this year at FDIC, him being able to go through Jimmy McCormick's training center there in Indianapolis, and phenomenal training. And it was so much fun, John, to see him into it. He was because Brian can come off. He can be a quiet young guy. He
was really just learning then.
Yeah.
And he's still learning. Obviously, we're all still learning, but he's coming up on a couple of years on the job now, and he's starting to get his legs. He's starting to know what he's talking about, and getting a couple of fires under his belt, and getting a lot of shift work under his belt, and training, and he just talks, and he knows what he's talking about, which is just a great first step of a long career.
Well, and working for a great fire department, another one, North Charleston, South Carolina, another 14 stations, I think.
12 or 13, I think.
12 or 13. Yeah. So big place. They're busy. Good bosses there, and just I'm excited for them. I thought that was so cool. I was like, that was like me being able to go and teach, at 29 Palms Marine Corps Base with my son there.
Right.
When they called him up and promoted him on stage and got to pin him, just being there. I can't imagine. You're riding out with your kid. I mean, this is.
It was fun. We jumped on the rig. Now that day they were riding short. You know, some days they ride short. Short is two guys up in the front and one guy in the back. And
Did they give you the can? Did they give you the can? Did they give you the can? Did they give you the can?
Actually, Brian put some gear on the rig for me. You know, and, so we jump up in there, and I said to him, "You guys wear your seatbelt?" He said, "Yep, every run they were putting their seatbelts on." And the officer even asked me, sort of like he wasn't trying to inconvenience me. Like, Chief, you know, if you don't mind, if you could just snap that seatbelt, even if you snap it behind you. I said, no. I got no problem wearing a seatbelt. You don't have to talk me into that. He said, yeah, we're supposed to be wearing them here. I said, I think it's a great rule, and boy, am I glad to hear it, you know. And every run we got on there, everybody had their seatbelt on. And I even mentioned to Brian, I said, yeah, there's some places that whine about, we're going to wear our seatbelt. It slows us down getting on. It slows us down getting off. He said, that's a bunch of nonsense. He snapped that thing on and snapped it off as quick as taking a piece of gum out of his mouth. You know what I'm saying? And no, I'm not saying everybody got the exact same seatbelts, but just like anything else, wearing seatbelts, wearing gear, putting your SCBA, it's just a matter of practice and a matter of experience, a matter of getting used to doing it, you know?
It is. And again, you've said it before, you know, we might as well, if we're not going to have bosses ride in the front seat, good company officers, then we ought to just put a robot there, a blinking light, a little mannequin, so you can drive through the, the HOV lanes, I guess. But
and then when they get back to the firehouse, you know, they pull up in front. Obviously, they got to pull a rig across the road. It's a 4-lane, not highway, but roadway. And both he and the officer get off, and both of them stop and grab a reflective vest and put it on, and before they jump out of the rig. Which I'm thinking to myself, man, you'd have to twist arms to get guys in the FDNY to put a vest on before they get off the rig to back in. But that's what they do every run. So they got a regular routine down, and it's all good stuff. So that it just goes to show you, busy, not busy, big, small. If you set the right pace, if the officer set the example, if people just do what they're supposed to do and do what they're told, things work out just fine, rather than fighting and arguing over stuff.
And you said it right. When it's the routine, that's like a long time ago, you know, people were like, I'll just say it, as a young paramedic in 1982, you know, I never thought about wearing latex gloves and, you know, all that different stuff. And then years later, when they told us we had to, I'm like, are you out of your mind? I'm not going to be able to feel the vein or tape it down or whatever. And now you wouldn't think of not wearing gloves at any level anymore.
Right. Guys are putting them gloves on when they're rolling out the door on an EMS run.
Yeah. Yep. So now it's, you know, all right, hopefully seatbelts, again, they should have been already, and most departments will be just like, hey, it's routine. It's almost awkward when you don't put it on, like in your car now.
But it was great. It was great. I had a lot of fun.
John, there's, you know, you and I both, we follow a lot of these forums and a lot of these blogs and all the different stuff, because we read we read things on social media and the websites and stuff. But you know, when we do even our old school podcast, we talk about worlds colliding. What used to work in most cases still works. There's things that we've changed. Obviously, we don't throw buckets of water through windows anymore either, and we don't use horses. But the topic of ventilation comes up quite often. When to vent, when not to vent. You know, I've said it before. When UL did their studies, you know, what it did for me was, I was like, okay, look, now I've got the science behind me saying, look, we've been saying for years, we've been telling our police officers, God bless them, if you get there ahead of us, please don't break all the windows and don't ventilate the place till we get there, because we've been teaching, you know, since day one academy for people to operate under a coordinated attack. You know, we've talked about coordinated aggressiveness, an aggressive coordinated attack between the hose line and ventilation, you know, and we'll get to like the OV and everything else there, how I think that helps. But, you know, old topic that's still relevant, John. I guess, you know, we just started talking about this before. Your thoughts, I mean, obviously, before we get going here a little bit more, we've said before that, you know, the very first thing you better do is start stretching the initial attack line, getting in there and trying to locate the seat of fire and doing your thing. Following that, either coordinated exactly at the same time or following that or really close to it, we need to be venting the building for two things. One is, you know, obviously, you know, to help any potential, make the environment more tenable for us and potentially any of them, but it's to get all the nasty ick and everything out of it and make our environment a little bit easier to, our cube, if you will, easier to work in when we're advancing it. But I think some people are, I don't know. I just think it's like, it's an old thing. You say it before, it's an old thing we're trying to put new labels on that, it's one of those basics, John, that we got to get to.
I agree. And this particular, not the topic of ventilation, but this topic of newness, this topic of some new ideas or changes or modern, God knows, I have no problem. I have no problem with anything new. I have no problem with trying new stuff. I have no problem with new concepts, new tactics. But what I frankly do have a problem with is taking old news and putting a new cover on it and calling it something new. And it's just, I don't know. When we started talking about VES and VEIS, and we can even talk about that tonight because, it is a type of ventilation. But, I always said to myself, it sort of really annoyed me that we were adding this new dimension to VES. We're adding this VEI, this isolation. I said the isolation was always understood. It was always taught along with the tactic. The tactic never existed without the isolation. And then eventually I said, you know what? I'm okay with that. You know what? I'm not going to upset myself over or fight an issue that it doesn't really matter. If adding an I to VES and turning it to VEIS helps the new generation, helps a younger generation of firefighters understand it and grasp it and use it, then I'm okay with that. Now having said that, but I'm not okay with just rehashing everything that we're already doing in the fire service, adding a letter to it or a number to it or a new name to it and calling it new. I mean, it's just false. It's just false advertising. So when we talk about ventilation, I have called ventilation, and you can probably track me down in writing or in audio somewhere many times, saying ventilation is probably one of the least understood or most misunderstood tactics in the fire service. Absolutely. And I'll tell you, that's a fact from my perspective. But number two is the reason that it's the most misunderstood tactic is it's probably the least used tactic. When and what does it all come back down to? It all comes back down to staffing again. It all comes back down to engine work versus truck work. Everybody has engines. Everybody, has people on their rig, but nobody has enough. So what do we end up doing first? We end up stretching a line to the front door, popping it, going in, putting the fire out, and ventilation ends up being a second thought or a secondary operation. So a lot of folks don't have experience in a first duty. The first duty they have on a fire scene is to do ventilation, like the FDNY and Chicago and some other big places have. When you have somebody whose primary tactical job on the fire ground is to ventilate, they get better at it and they understand it a little bit better. And when we look at stuff like horizontal ventilation of the fire floor, whether it's in a house or a 2 or 3 story apartment house, in the FDNY, we quit just randomly doing horizontal ventilation 25 or 30 years ago. I can't remember if I was a firefighter or a young lieutenant, but the FDNY changed. They changed our ladder street document and several other bulletins that went along with it. And it said, if somebody on the outside, and this is not exact words, but they said if the firefighter on the outside is prepared and ready and in position to ventilate horizontally the fire area, they have to call on the radio and speak to the officer of the team inside and make sure it's okay with that person. Make sure that person gives them permission. Yeah, go ahead, Billy, vent. Or hold up on the vent until they finish a room or close a door or leave with the victim or whatever. So in the old days, we'd get in position, I climbed to the fire escape, an 11 truck, get in position, say nothing. Bing, bang, boom. I'd vent the windows, climb down, or wait a few minutes and climb in. No more. And that no more started 20 years ago.
And John, that goes back. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I guess I did. I love when people say, "I hate to interrupt you," but you did. But you just said communicating. Letting them know. And we've talked about the importance of communication on the fire round and not overdoing it, not wearing out the radio and becoming the radio talk show host, but giving good, clear, concise information. You just talked about how pertinent, how important it is for the communication between the vent crew and the interior crew, the attack crew. And there's been times where I think, I know we have vented at the wrong time. There have been times where we're waiting for water and somebody gets overly aggressive on the other side. And now we've just made our whole environment a lot more hostile. We haven't given us a chance to even get any water flowing and we've done things a little bit too soon. But you just said it, the communication between the whoever, whether it's the vent team or, and I want to bring up the outside vent man here in a second because you said something else, but that is so critical. There's a slide we use about giving your people the information they need to do their job. We do it in our mentoring section of 5 Alarm Leadership, John. And it's one of your OVs, you know the picture, fire blowing out it's a tenement, I think, in occupancy to his right. He's got his Halligan, and he's taken the windows of the unit or the room next door. And you've always said, look, the information here is, the lack of information could be before they open that door into that room that he's venting, someone should call him and say, we're getting ready to, I've always used that picture saying, look what we can end up doing to this firefighter if we don't tell him or her that we're getting ready to breach into this room and possibly let fire push out into his face without telling him what we're doing. So communication, I just want to bring that up. That was key, what you just said.
Absolutely. And, because so much of what we do on the fire ground, again, whether it's multiple dwellings or apartments or a private house on a half an acre lot, garden apartments, so much of what we do, the teams around the fire, the teams on the outside sometimes aren't aware of what the teams on the inside are doing. The teams on exposure 3 in the rear of the building aren't always aware of what teams on the front of the building are doing. Sometimes folks up on the roof are not exactly aware of what's going on in the interior hallway or the stairway below them. So obviously communication is important because we have that. We have that line of communication established. I think that's been pretty well nailed down across the whole country. Just about everybody going into burning buildings has radios. If they don't, you have a major malfunction underway in your fire department. But let's assume everybody does. Everybody's got the ability to just reach up, grab that mic, squeeze with 2 fingers and say, we're making entry into the fire room, start water. Even issues like that, even a radio transmission, 4-8 to show up or start water. Now the outside vent guy knows, there's water going in. Now the guy searching the floor above there's water on the fire floor in a moment. We're in the floor above. We're in a little better place than we were a moment ago. So that whole communication element of ventilation is very important as well.
Well, that's key too. Like you said, you're on the floor above doing your job, and you hear that. That's when you look at your guys. Okay, we could push a little bit harder because now they're flowing water. They're getting this going. I can't remember how many times I said it. I remember you made me think of one fire in particular. We were feeling the heat, and I could hear the guys up on the roof, and I'm going, and I kept telling this young firefighter, just hang tight. We're doing good. We were actually searching. I said, we're gonna feel some, and you got that pressure pushing on you. Nothing's open on the backside. And I said, we're about to feel, as soon as you hear them cut and push down, we're gonna feel some relief. And I remember we got back, he said, oh my God, it's like someone took the whole backside of the building off because everything that was hitting us went away with it. I said, well, that's what a simple act of ventilation can do when done properly and at the right time when it comes to making that environment better. Now, John, you said something earlier about, ventilation sometimes is the second thought. You pull up minimum staffing, maybe you don't have a couple of guys to send to the roof or whatever. And I think, and we could talk a little more about this later, but the outside vent man, the outside vent person is huge. I know it was huge in Louisville and still is. On the truck companies, they run 5 all the time. The 5th guy is the outside vent man. The officer is jumpsuit guy of the 4th Century Search Team. The driver and his partner, the vent team. And the 5th guy is the outside. And it's a SOG'd, practiced, trained position. And you and I have both rattled off in class all the things you can get done. Just one person. So like you said, you show up with minimum staffing. You show up with a couple people, and you have that one extra person that takes off for the back of the building. They get around back, and this is where they know you're coming in there. They can, as they're walking around, we've talked about, John, as they're walking around, they can shut the gas off for you, address the utilities, get into the backyard. They're doing their size up. They're looking at fire conditions, smoke conditions. It's still the first or the second floor. Any sign of life. Are there kids' toys back there, or just a bunch of religious statues or gardens, maybe seniors? Is there a wheelchair ramp? Bars on the windows, everything else, bedroom, the whole makeup, and a built-in swimming pool, and overhead wires, and chain link fence, and dogs, and you and I talk about, and there's literally, we could talk about that another night, just getting the back of the building. And then you get around there and they're able to force that door, giving that interior crew a second means of egress, do a quick sweep right with their hook, make sure there's nobody back there. And if it's 2 in the morning, go, okay, back door, kitchen, bathroom, that's a bedroom window. Take a window, feel around, give some, but just giving that backside, even popping the door or taking one window, that simple act of ventilation, like you just said earlier, coordinated if you can. One guy, gal, getting to the back with a Halligan and with a hook and taking one window or one door while the crew's making a push, that could be the deal maker, if you will, not breaker, the deal maker for that attack inside, right? I mean, that's critical. I know you guys in the FDNY are huge with the outside vent man and what that person can accomplish.
Absolutely. And whether you have an outside vent man or whether you have an outside vent team, even folks in smaller departments, not volunteers specifically, but a lot of volunteer departments have members that are not interior. They're not interior qualified. They're exterior firefighters. They wear gear. They're trained up. They carry tools. They ride the rigs.
Fully qualified.
In the front door. Well, guess what? There's a perfect outside vent guy for a 1 or a 2-story house. Can get around to the back. One or two firefighters, and theoretically, he could send somebody around the back door of a home at 8 o'clock at night to vent the rear window with his radio. Tell them, okay, hold up, vent it now. Obviously, we want to put teams as much as possible, but small places with thin staffing or volunteer companies that don't have a big turnout for a particular fire, you can use exterior firefighters for that. And whether or not it's an exterior firefighter, that outside vent position is very important. You can call it anything you want, but it's a very important position. And like you said, the most important part of that is coordinated. And like I said, some new folks are talking about coordinating ventilation with fire attack like it's a new idea. And if it's new to them, that's fine. And it's still true. Even though it's not new, it still is true that you need to coordinate. Nobody should just be doing, I don't want to call it rampant, but unscheduled, unplanned, uncoordinated ventilation is obviously a very dangerous tactic. Well, it almost equals, it's almost the same event. It's almost the same result as when the fire vents itself before we get there. Now we have fire burning up the outside of the house. We have a room flashed over, maybe spreading horizontally inside, maybe causing more damage to humans and to the building because it's flashed over now, because it has oxygen, because it's vented. So we don't want to do what the fire sometimes does by itself, or occasionally a well-meaning but uninformed other civil servant or neighbor might come by and break a window. But we want to definitely limit it.
Oh, well, the civil servant, but I can remember. I remember being on a hose line and we're pushing through. We got fire, about midship, and I'll just say it. This is years ago. Had a deputy chief show up. He'd been off. It was the evening. He'd been home, and I think he had a little bit to drink. This guy showed up, and behind us, nothing open. Behind us, I heard all the windows smashing out. He run up with an axe, and I'm telling you, this thing lit up like there was no tomorrow, like a train heading back over our head. And I'm like, and as a younger firefighter, it takes you sometimes a little bit for the realization, the light to come on. You go, well, no, duh, that's what it wants to do. The heat and everything wants to go to the cold or to the oxygen, and that's why we talk about this coordinating thing. But the outside vent person, now it's OVM or team, but even like you said, that one person, hope to God they're radio equipped, okay? But that one person, go ahead, take it. We're making it, go ahead. I mean, bang, 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 one window. And how many, John, you've been doing this 40 plus years. Some of the busiest companies in FDNY, the stories of the lives that were saved due to properly ventilated. We tell people to get on the floor because that's where the best chance for survival is, with the cleanest air or whatever, so on and so forth. And to be able to give that relief to someone, to be able to give, let's say you're outside vent person, outside vent man, you do a bedroom and they're sleeping with their bedroom closed, but it filled up, no smoke detector, whatever. Now you've given them some time, you bought them some time. Our good friend Sal Marchese, on your job, 142 truck in Queens was on 111 truck. I used to call him Sal Marchese. What a great guy. But John, I remember showing up to ride out with him, and they had just had a job, and I missed it. This one, the only room that wasn't on fire was the room his OV went to. Took the window and made a grab, drug a guy out unconscious. They were writing him up. I mean, the only window. So two things there. One is it goes back to what you said, and our good friend Chief Butch Cobb has said. No one ever has been rescued from inside a burning building without a firefighter going in and getting them. But just because you have fire out all these windows in here, you got someone. And right, we're telling everybody, which I think it's a great campaign. Close the door. Keep the doors closed when your kids go to bed or whatever. But I think we've talked about it. Get in there, close the door, all this stuff. Well, you know what? We're telling people that here's a chance, to do an outside vent job, to go in, video OVM, take a window, go in and actually save a life. If we're telling people to keep their doors closed and close the doors for their kids, and you and I both, we've seen it. We like the pictures of, look at the difference with the door closed. Just the outside vent, man, has the ability to save a life, and even if it's the outside firefighter, like you said, the person that works strictly outside, to give that person a better chance so the interior crews can get them. But one person, oh my God, that one person, it's the deal maker, like I said before, for allowing them to get in and push.
And I've had some discussions and some not really debates, but let's just call it some discussions with some folks lately, both on stage and at conferences and elsewhere, about this concept of ventilation and withholding ventilation and holding up and timing it and things of that nature. And another issue that's sort of a more modern issue that sometimes I think it clouds the water rather than clears it is this whole research and experimentation concept that there's some organizations, and we know it's NIST and UL, and there's others now that are out there doing experiments. They're doing live fire experiments and ventilation experiments and hose line experiments and extinguishing experiments, and those are all wonderful. But I have said from the first experiment about the first topic, and I stand by my words, and I know they're true, and it cannot be disproven. There are so many variables in just a single room fire in a private dwelling. There are so many variables. The fire load, not only the fire load, what's the position? How is the furniture positioned in a room? How many openings are there? Is there a window? Is there a screen on the window? Is the door open? Is it not open? Is the door open to the hallway? Is there a ventilation going? Is there air conditioning in the building? There are so many variables that play a role in effective firefighting that just make some folks nowadays are making statements like, this must be withheld until you do this. You can't do ventilation until you have this. Well, I know it's got to be coordinated, but frankly, Charlotte, I can't tell you until I'm at a fire and I'm looking at the building and I've done a quick walk around and I see what I have, how big it is, how small it is. I really can't tell you when the exact time of ventilation is, the best time for effectiveness to coordinate it with a hose line. I really can't tell you when that is on a piece of paper or on a telephone or on a radio show. I would have to be at that fire. There's so many variables that for the folks out there that are either writing articles or making presentations and think that you can teach people, think that you can instruct them when the best moment is to do horizontal ventilation for an interior fire that you're anticipating doing an interior attack on is absolute nonsense. You have to be at that fire to make those decisions. You have to be able to visibly look at that building and measure and see what you can see. And of course, some of the variables are unknown till the fire's out. Some of them you just don't know. I've been in buildings where all of a sudden you discover that the family was storing 7 extra mattresses in their extra bedroom. 7 mattresses in the extra bedroom. That's a gigantic fire load that doesn't exist in any other room in the house. And if you have a fire in that room, because some young little kid lit a match, and he's playing with fire, that's going to be a dramatically different fire than a couch on fire in grandma's room or a sofa on fire in a living room of a larger home. So everybody's trying to nail everything down to exactness and to exact scenarios and to exact, experimental results and factual numbers and degree raising temperatures. And you know what? I understand it. And I think that they're probably trying to do a good thing. But I think we're really trying to nail things down too closely. And I think we're trying to make an exact science out of something that does not operate in an exact manner.
Well, and you just said so. This whole exact and must, we've said before, never say never, never say always in a fire service, except, you know what, wear your seatbelt, put your face piece on, get it back, or those things. But the one thing that's been true forever, you've heard me talk about one of my idols in the fire service, Chief Jack McCaslin. Chief Jack McCaslin on the south side of Chicago, Oak Lawn, Orland. One of my absolute idols. You've seen me. I'm showing you pictures of him. Decorated Marine Corps Vietnam vet. He should be dead for what he had to do in Vietnam as a Marine. Incredible man. He used to do this thing when he would teach tactics, John, or when he would do talk about vet. He'd go, look, way back when Enoch the caveman, when Enoch discovered fire, Enoch went, oh, fire good. Keep me warm. No more raw meat, right? He goes, what happened to Enoch about 10 minutes later? 10 minutes later, he come crawling out of his cave with snots hanging out of his nose and his eyes and his crying. What did Enoch put in his next cave? A hole, a chimney to get, So the one thing, since Enoch discovered fire and lit it in his cave, that's still true today, like you said, regardless, forget all the must and all that, is the impact that good, proper ventilation, whether for some people that's popping a window, short staffing, the crew's going in, they set a fan. I'm not a big fan person, but I've said before, not every roof gets a hole in it, but pretty much every fire gets ventilated. And what it does for the people, those people out there that you've said before, them, what it does for them, what it does for us to be able to do our jobs better. I think the key is coordinated when you have the personnel, but it's kind of like, John, when you said the must thing years ago, long time ago, we went to fires, we did our stuff, and people had, some good guidelines, SOPs. And then people started writing, they started writing the SOPs where you have to, and you must, and you have to. And then what do we find out about 10, 15 years later? Guess what? That didn't work. So we went back to saying, look, on the fire round or on emergencies, we have SOGs, we have guidelines. When the lieutenant pulls up, that company officer pulls up, when you tell him or her that they have to do this, they have to park here, they have to pull this line, they have to do this, what happens when you can't do that? You talk about it in our one class. Every situation requires innovation. Same house, day 2, right next door, same fire, same location, but there's so many variables, and you keyed in on this before, that there's so many variables that go into when and where and all. I think that the constant through it all, like James Earl Jones says in Field of Dreams, the constant has been baseball. Baseball, Ray, has been, it's ventilation, Ray Kinsella. That's been the constant the whole time, that venting properly, a good trained, well-trained firefighter that knows when and where, again, is I'll say it again, is the deal maker for the crew that's inside.
And that's why I think, along with ventilation probably being one of the most misunderstood tactics in the fire service, I think it's also one of the least practiced, which I already mentioned. And since those two things are true, I think we can safely assume that it's probably one of the least addressed when it comes to training. If you look at the number of topics that folks train on, I'll bet you got to look long and far to find a training session, a training class on ventilation in lots of places. Not everywhere. I'm not saying nobody's training on ventilation, but I'll bet we collectively, everybody in the fire service, we collectively could spend a little bit more time. I bet we could spend a lot more time, but I know we could spend some more time on ventilation training, ventilation hands-on training. Now, there's some guys out there, excuse me, with these little mini houses showing smoke movement and stuff like that, and there's a value to all of that. But I'm talking about real live. Now, and you can do live ventilation training without it not being live fire training. You can pump some pretty nasty smoke into a vacant building or into a training building without a fire being in there. You don't have to comply with any kind of live fire evolution requirements, and you can still get people in there to see how smoke acts when you ventilate, when you open the front door, when you open the door at the top, when you pop the roof ventilation hole opening, and things of that nature. So I think a little hands-on live ventilation segment in training is probably in order for most folks that are able to do that.
Well, and absolutely. And let me ask you this, hit on this one, John. While we're talking ventilating and decision making and when to, when not to, and where to, and all that stuff, let's talk about that leader. Let's talk about the two firefighters with the senior firefighter or the company officer. And you've heard me talk about it. I've got pictures and videos of crews topside where the company officer has the saw in his hand or is part, is working. And I'm not saying, look, I know there's short crews out there where you have to pitch in and help, but when you see, three of them on the roof and the officer's in the mix of that, I've been a big believer, John, the officer needs to distance himself. The officer needs to be looking at roof conditions, fire conditions, away from the saw or whatever, where they can hear the radio, they can hear the 1/8 battalion talking to them, instead of in the mix and looking in the hole and cutting with the saw and working and all that. You're the leader of the crew, but you're also their safety. They're working their asses off if they're masked up or not or whatever. Their peripheral vision's screwed up. They've got smoke, different things like that. Same thing on the backside. When to maybe a good officer, the discipline of controlling that good, God bless him or her, young, aggressive firefighter from venting too soon or venting too much and making a bigger problem, out of the situation. But how about the leadership end of it, John, for that, the guy or gal who's the senior firefighter lieutenant in charge of that vent crew? How about that person?
Yeah, I mean, that sort of overlaps a lot of the other topics as well. And it overlaps training, it overlaps all those things, because if the officer is just paying lip service to ventilation, if the engine officer or truck officer isn't addressing that much, or just says, don't worry about that, we're going to get this done over here, we're forcible entry, we're search and rescue, we got to go make a grab, don't worry about the ventilator, fire ventilator itself. You get the guys talking like that, and then what happens? Young firefighters start believing that, and then you end up with another whole generation of people not worried about ventilating, figuring out a fire ventilator itself, don't worry about it. I've heard young firefighters in different situations repeating bad information that they heard from their officers because they heard it from their officer. So certainly people in a leadership role, people in supervisory roles, people riding the front seat, people riding the fire car. You want to be a boss in a fire department, you better have, and if you don't have, you better develop a good understanding of the value and the importance of ventilation for interior structural firefighting. It's as important as putting water on a fire. I mean, we always say how important water is, and obviously water is that's the actual event, putting water on the fire. But a lot of these other things are going to allow that to happen, period, or they're going to allow it to happen more quickly or more safely or more effectively.
Well, and let me ask you this. I already know the answer, but I'm doing this for our audience. In the FDNY, we'll just pick on the FDNY right now. Second due truck, the roof man getting to the roof. Can they just blow that off? Or we've talked about this before without talking about any particular companies. You tell one story, we won't mention who they were. About,
I know the story you're talking about.
How explain to our audience. I mean, because you really are, I will say this, very, very dramatic about how you explain the importance of that person getting to the roof. Yep.
Now, I've been retired for several years, so I don't know the exact wording of the bulletins, because the bulletins are pretty dynamic in the FDNY. The firefighting procedures and things are constantly updated and upgraded and changed and improved, and so occasionally things change. All the years that I was in the fire department, nothing shall deter the roof man from getting into position, from attaining his position up on the roof. Now, we have a first due truck and a second due truck. Both of them have a roof firefighter, okay? And for years, decades, and longer, it said nothing shall deter. And they weren't kidding when they said nothing. And I've exaggerated, and I've described, dramatic examples of that, of a rescue needing to be made, and the roof firefighter has to walk past that and continue going to the roof. Even if two firefighters are putting a ladder up and they need a little help they need just a little help to get somebody out of that second or third floor window. Guess what? He cannot disengage. The roof man cannot disengage from his trek to the roof. He can't stop, put his tool down, and say, I'll just help these guys for a minute. Because if a minute turns into 2 minutes, turns into 3 minutes, he doesn't get to the roof. If he doesn't get to the roof, the vital tasks that he is charged with undertaking, roof ventilation, horizontal ventilation to the top floor, bulkhead ventilation, skylight ventilation, all those things are never going to happen if he doesn't get up there. So they add the important statement nothing shall deter him. And it's literal. It's literal. It's not. I remember when I was a chief in the 18th Battalion, obviously before I retired, we had a pretty good fire in a 2-story. I think it was a 2-family building, 2-story flat roof brick building with a pretty good heavy fire on the first floor and a lot of people trapped on the second floor, all showing at windows when the companies got there. I was on the box along with the engine and truck for my firehouse with us, who were, I believe, the second due engine and second due truck. I know it was the second due truck. And when we got back from the fire, I remember overhearing on the apparatus floor the truck firefighters talking about how our roof firefighter, the second due truck, had made it to the roof and he was up there by himself. The first due firefighter did not make it to the roof from the truck. And they talked about it. And then he continued to say, well, eventually somebody got up there, a roof guy, or not a roof guy, a chauffeur got up there. And I said, gee, that's interesting. Now, some other stuff happened after that impacted. But it didn't impact anything as much as it impacted those folks that needed to be rescued from the second floor. Because although that roof firefighter didn't go up to the roof because he thought his services were needed so desperately around the outside of the building, putting up ladders and removing visible victims, if he would have made it to the roof earlier and worked with the first due roof firefighter, they would have had that roof ventilated earlier. That would have relieved conditions on the top floor. And some of those dramatic removals and rescues via window, via portable ladder, may not have had to have been done. They might not have had to have performed them if the ventilation had been performed properly, and in a more timely manner. So sometimes it's not the immediate thing. Sometimes you don't see the immediate result of your labor, but it's built into the system. Immediate ventilation, hold up on horizontal ventilation until the right time comes. All these things have been thought out and tried out and used before.
Well, and John, we've obviously been talking about ventilation tonight as a topic for our show, and we've mentioned it umpteen times before when we're doing tactics and strategy and the rest of stuff, so on and so forth. If we were going to give our listeners some takeaways, for me, from my end, as we close things out here, would be, I would say, I used to say, vent early, vent often, which is not necessarily the truth, but, the coordination is huge. I think that's huge to be able to, and you're not going to do that. It goes back to what you said. We've got another show coming up on our old school podcast later about the portable radios. It's going to be difficult to do that, to say the least, if you don't have radios for your people. But the coordinated, attack we've taught since day one of the Fire Academy between the attack team and the vent team, what it does for us, it makes the environment more tenable, and potentially any of them makes everybody's jobs easier. And again, the priority of the accomplishments that you can get done with a well-trained firefighter or team of firefighters when it comes to venting the fire, if I would say anything, it would be slap the priority back on. Like you said, it's become kind of one of those things that now all of a sudden it's like a new thing. Well, you know what? Maybe we need it to get people to refocus and pay it the importance that it's due when it comes to the whole firefighter scenario.
I agree. I think a lot of it has to do with what you mentioned before. Leadership, supervision, bosses, officers, knowing what their job is, stressing to their firefighters. How many times have you heard people say it, both at seminars and firehouses you've worked at and volunteered at? We can't think of what to drill on tonight. And I can think of 5 things that probably most firefighters haven't drilled on once in the past year or two. So you see how important it is to have good officers who have their nose to the grindstone, and they're paying attention to what's going on and developing their people and doing timely and frequent training on topics that are going to have an impact on what we do every day.
And you just said it. I was going to finish with that. The training, you mentioned it earlier. Let's get back to get some old tree trunks out there. Let's get back to the chopping exercises to teach our young firefighters how to chop with an axe, with a maul, with a tool. Let's get them to know their saws. Each saw, we always said this, I think every saw has its own personality. Know your saws and know the personality of your saws. So you're not, you're ready to go, to know your tools, know your ladders, know your devices, know everything that you're doing. Hey, if you're a PPV person, know when to, when not to. Know, not when these people that's at the front door pulling this thing because it's flooded or whatever. Know what you're doing. No, you said it before. Know your job, and you're not going to do that unless you train, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, perfect. Hey, to our listeners, you've been listening to the Command Post on fireengineering.com with Chief John Salka, Chief Rick Lasky, and we appreciate you joining us again. Spread the word. We're both on Facebook and Twitter and our websites. John, best way for them to get a hold of you at johnsalka.com or at your email. Which one?
ChiefJohnSalka@gmail.com.
And I'm at prideandownership.com or chieflasky@gmail.com. But hey, folks, a reminder, FDIC registration is opening up in a couple days. A lot of great classes, over 200 classes, classroom sessions. If you're going to be there for the workshops, don't miss the workshop John and I are going to be doing for the Chief Officer Field Training Program. If you're a battalion chief, shift commander, anybody that runs that stuff, last year filled up really quick, so don't wait to register for that class. And then looks like we'll be doing the 3 Degrees of Mayday again on Friday. That room always fills up, so make sure you get there early for that one. And don't miss the issues and challenges in the fire service on Thursday afternoon with Chief Bobby Halton and John and myself. That's unscripted. We're just up there, and Chief Halton said this year we're putting the kitchen table there, and it's just going to be the 3 of us talking and doing our thing. So hopefully we'll get to see you there. If not, John, any closing remarks? Will we close things out?
Nothing other than everybody should be out there learning and reading and studying and playing and training.
Hey, in closing, folks, we always say this. Please keep the men and women served in armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And remember, never forgetting means never forgetting. Thanks for listening in, and be safe, and God bless you.